Okay, welcome everyone. We're so excited for this live tour of Vimy Ridge in France. Today we have Jean-Pierre Godbout and Anaka Boucher who are joining us for this tour. Thank you so much for being here. So I would like to start by acknowledging that I am currently on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe people in Ottawa. And yeah, so today for the celebration of History Places Days, we are going to be talking a little bit about the National Memorial of Vimy Ridge that is situated in French. So I would love for you to maybe give a little bit of introduction of what is the site and tell us a little bit more so that we know more about the site. And then at the end, if anyone has some questions, you're more than welcome to write them down in the chat. And we will be happy to answer. La présentation va également être bilingue, donc s'il y a des francophones qui veulent poser leurs questions en français, on est capable également de répondre aux questions en français. Donc, you can, yes, please, you can introduce yourself in the chat, tell us where you're calling from, we'd love to hear from you. And Jean-Pierre, I'm leaving it over to you.
Great, merci beaucoup Vanessa. Alors, bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everybody. My name is Jean-Pierre Godbout. I'm the acting manager of visitor experience here at the Canadian National Vimy Memorial. Or more precisely, I work for Veterans Affairs Canada, European Operations Directorate. We're the lucky team that are responsible for the Canadian National Vimy Memorial, as well as the Beaumont-Hamel Newfoundland Memorial. As a bit of context, Veterans Affairs Canada is also responsible for for a total of 14 memorials throughout France, mainly northern France, Belgium, and as well as Green Park in the United Kingdom, not too far away from Buckingham Palace, actually. And so Veterans Affairs Canada is responsible for these sites. It is part of our core mandate, but probably one of our most well-known sites and where we get the larger amount of visitors is the Canadian National Vimy Memorial. It is an iconic memorial, and we are lucky enough to welcome folks from around the world. Donc, on a chanceux où on a des visiteurs qui nous parviennent de partout à travers le monde pour visiter le Mémorial national du Canada à Vimy, que ça soit d'ici de l'Europe. Et maintenant que la pandémie est un peu derrière nous, on recommence à voir de plus en plus de Canadiens et de Canadiennes qui font le voyage jusqu'à Vimy. Donc, en temps normal, on a quand même un nombre intéressant de visiteurs qui nous parviennent du Canada, que ce soit des jeunes étudiants ou des adultes qui reviennent voir Vimy ou qui découvrent Vimy pour une première fois. C'est un site qui est quand même assez grand et il y a plusieurs choses à visiter sur le site, mais on y découvre quelque chose de nouveau à chaque fois. So it is a large site. It is rich in history. And of course, it's not just about the monument. There is also so much more to discover in this site, and you'll see in the video that we'll be presenting to you. And we really would have loved to give you a tour live from our 2 feet at Vimy, but circumstances have brought us to that. While we're doing it virtually right now, and both Annika and myself are sitting in our homes right now, but believe me, it is worth seeing the site and visiting the sites in person. So without further ado, I want to present to you Annika. Annika is one of the guides that has been working with us this summer and was with us as well last summer, and has been able to share the stories of Canadians that fought at Vimy, but also Canadian history in terms of what Canada's role was during the First World War. Annika has the pleasure of welcoming, like I said, folks from all over and tell them about her stories. So without further ado, I will pass the puck to Annika, and she will introduce us a few items before we move on to our actual tour.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre. So the Canadian National Vimy Memorial is one of only 2 Canadian National Historic Sites outside of Canada, the other being the previously mentioned Beaumont-Hamel Newfoundland Memorial. As Jean-Pierre said, visitors from across the world, and of course Canada, come to discover the unique memorial we have here, as well as our preserved trenches and tunnels. We have a visitor center that has a museum inside of it, and cemeteries. We have plenty on site to see. The Vimy Memorial, although located on the site where the Battle of Vimy Ridge took place, is actually dedicated to Canadians who fought in the whole of the First World War. You'll be learning more about the significance of the memorial in the upcoming video. Le site du Mémorial national du Canada à Vimy nous permet de partager avec nos visiteurs une page de l'histoire du Canada, mais aussi les histoires de ceux qui sont venus de si loin pour se battre en Europe et au cours d'une guerre sanglante. Nous espérons que cette visite vidéo vous fera découvrir davantage notre site pour une première fois ou de le revoir si vous êtes déjà venu en personne dans le passé. It'll be our pleasure to try and answer any questions you may have after we play the video. Nous fera plaisir de répondre à vos questions après la vidéo.
Yeah, merci beaucoup, Annika. So, folks, you may want to adjust your sounds, your volume on your computers or phones or whichever device you're using to watch this on. The video is about 13-14 minutes long. We'll be exploring different aspects of the site, namely the tunnels, which aren't seeing a lot of visitors these days, unfortunately. So it was exciting for us to go back down there and be able to film these different segments. So the tunnels will be one of the parts we'll be visiting. The trenches, we have trenches that are outside of the visitor center, followed by the monument, and finishing it off with something that's a little bit special, and that is you'll be exploring the crypt located under the monument, and that section of the monument is usually closed off to public. So this one will be pretty exclusive for folks that are online with us today. So hopefully you'll enjoy. Go ahead and ask your questions in the chat or keep them for the end. We'll be happy to answer them. Donc, si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à les poser dans le chat ou tout de suite après. Ça va nous faire plaisir d'y répondre. Vous allez voir, on va explorer une grosse partie du site ensemble à travers cette vidéo. Enfin, vous allez peut-être vouloir ajuster votre volume en conséquence. Merci beaucoup tout le monde et bon visionnement.
We are now 8 meters below ground in the Grange subway. As you can imagine, at the time, things would have looked a little different. Over the years, we have made some adjustments for the health and safety of our visitors. At the time, there would have been no concrete blocks, overhang, or metal grills. Again, this is for the health and safety of everyone. Back in 1917, the subway would have been built in an arch form, which is auto-supportive. However, every now and again, you would have had wooden beams to give it an added support. It would have been approximately 2 meters in height, so only slightly taller than me, and only approximately 1 meter to 1.5 meters in width. There would have been electric lighting at this point in time as well. However, not the nice fluorescent lights we have here today. There would have been one light approximately every 20 meters and only shining at about 220 volts, which is approximately what our emergency lights do today. So with that, I will turn off the lights to give you folks an idea. Now, we just came out of bright light. Our eyes haven't quite adjusted. So if you were down here any amount of time, your eyes would slowly adjust, however, not quite as bright as we would like today. On the morning of April 9th, 1917, there would have been approximately 4 battalions down here waiting to go up to the surface. It's approximately 3,000 men in this 1.2 kilometer subway, waiting in the dark as we remember, some of them waiting up close to 36 hours. Before the battle, they were very aware of what the casualty rate would be, and it was 1 in every 3. So I know you folks are online. If you look to the box to the left of you, you look to the box to the right of you, one of you 3 would have been a casualty. And they were very aware of this while waiting to go up to the trenches. At 4:30 in the morning, they were given the order to make their way up and get ready for the advance. The subway systems wouldn't have been dug by just any soldier. They would have been dug by professional miners and engineers. This subway here, in particular, was dug by the Welsh miners. So there was no fancy machinery back then to dig these tunnels. They would have been digging by hand with your pickaxes and your shovels, like you can see in the reproductions down here in the grid. They would have dug approximately 8 meters per day. And in total, accessing the Vimy Ridge, there's approximately 10 kilometers worth of subways and tunnel systems. For every cubic meter dug, they would fill approximately 200 sandbags worth of debris that then would get shipped up behind the lines in carts, much like you can see further down. And these would be placed further in the back and packed with mud. As you can imagine, the chalk down here, it's a little difficult to see because of the age, but it is a bright white substance. So the reason they would pack this down with mud and hide it in sandbags is this bright white substance would, one, not only let the opposing force know that they were digging in the area, but also if the opposing force were to send over a shell, you can imagine this white powder, once a shell hits it, it will explode and it will create a lovely dusting of white powder all over the trench system. And it will be easily recognizable by aerial surveillance. And the opposing force would have a good idea of what the Canadian or the British forces sides would have looked like. This tunnel here is known as the Black Watch Tunnel, as it would have been the Black Watch Division, or Black Watch Battalion rather, who would have been down here prior to the battle on the ridge. Attached to many of these subway systems would have been what are known as deep fighting tunnels. So further back, there is the entrance to a deep fighting tunnel that would have served here on the ridge. Now, these tunnels, unlike the subway systems, would go approximately 30 meters deep underground. And the purpose was that men could go down, place ammonal or explosive, pack the entrance with sandbags, which then, once detonated, would force the explosion to go up rather than back at the tunnel. And we will see the purpose of that once we head out into no man's land. But unlike the subway systems, where it is 30 meters below ground, there was not the same access to oxygen as would have been in a normal subway system. For example, the Grange had 14 entrances and exits, along with ventilation shafts. So there was ample supply of oxygen. However, as you can imagine, 30 meters below ground, this was not the case. So they would use air pumps to bring down the oxygen to the soldiers. But on top of that, where they were digging so deep, quite often they would hit the water table. So you would then have water pumps, which would pump the water up so the men could keep digging. But where it as the water table, this was potable water, which was of great use for the soldiers. So they would bring them up in areas like this, where there would be a basin where they would then hold the water that would then be distributed to the men. We are now standing at the Canadian Forces Outpost line. As you can see, the trench line is not straight, and this was to help protect the soldiers. You can imagine if you had a straight trench and an opposing force had fired a shell which landed in this trench, the shrapnel would fly in a straight line and would very easily kill and injure many of the men. But by having this curvature within the trench, that if a shell fell in, that the vast majority of these shrapnel pieces would fly into the walls rather than into the soldiers. At the time, the trench walls would have been a little bit higher so that no man could be seen from over top. They would have been built with sandbags, unlike the concrete that we see here today. There wouldn't have been a nice gravel floor, rather a lot of mud, as well as duck boards, which is much like a wooden ladder laid flat along the bottom to help try to elevate the men from the mud. The mud would often cause many illnesses such as trench foot, where the men's feet would quite literally be so wet all the time that they would start to rot. Life in the trenches was not glamorous. There was not very much to do. There were all of these illnesses. You had influenza, you had trench foot, jaundice, and then on top of that, you would have rats, mice, lice, all of these other creatures living with you. The men wouldn't spend all of their time up in the lines, but rather they would rotate back every week or so, and then spend some time in the back in shelters. Here, the outpost line would have only held approximately 8 men at a time because no man's land here is only approximately 25 meters. I'm now standing in the German forces trenches. As you can see, compared to the Canadian forces trenches, the German forces trenches took a shape a little bit more tighter than that curve that you would see of the Canadian forces. It's more of a zipper pattern. The German forces were notoriously better and known for building stronger and better trenches. At the time, they would have been using concrete, rebar to really reinforce their trench systems. Not only was this making it a stronger, more fortified trench system, but you also have to consider that the Allied forces at this point in the war were really trying to continue to move and push forward, whereas the German forces had chosen their land and were trying to defend. So they were building stronger fortifications because they were not intending on moving. To the right of me, you will see a giant crater. Now, contrary to popular belief, these craters were not created by a shell. There were no shells at this point in time that would have been strong enough to create this deep of an impact, but rather this goes back to the deep fighting tunnels that we visited earlier. As I said, they would place ammonal in the bottom of these tunnels, burn off the entrance, which would force the explosion to go up rather than back into the tunnel. When the explosion went up, it would create a large crater such as this. And the rationale was to help change the landscape. So this would prevent the opposing force from going in and completing night raids. However, as you can imagine, on the morning of April 9th, 1917, this would also create an obstacle for the Canadian forces moving forward. I'm currently standing where the 3rd Canadian Division would have advanced. Further to the north would have been the 4th Canadian Division, and then to our south would have been the 1st and 2nd Canadian Divisions. At 5:30 in the morning, all 4 divisions would move forward towards the east, towards Vimy Ridge. The first 3 Canadian divisions were successful in capturing their objectives on that first day. The 4th Canadian Division, who was responsible for capturing the highest point of the ridge, where the monument stands today, ran into more fortifications and did not capture their objective on that first day. However, they would be successful the next day on April 10th. retrouve sur le monument les noms de 11 285 soldats canadiens sans sépulture connue en France. Ce monument n'était pas construit pour représenter une grande victoire militaire, mais pour représenter la paix entre différentes nations. After the First World War, there was a growing need to commemorate all of those men and women who sacrificed so much. So in 1920, the Canadian Battlefield Memorial Commission was created, and they decided on 8 locations in France and in Belgium to erect memorials to commemorate the efforts of these men and women. A national architectural competition was launched with the idea of finding a design that would be identical for each of these locations. However, when Allward brought forward his design for this memorial, it was decided that it was too grandiose to place in 8 different locations. So initially it was decided that this memorial would be placed at Hill 62. However, many of the militia members argued against this, saying that it should be placed here at Vimy Ridge, as April 9th, 1917 was the highest cost and the highest level of casualties for the Canadian Expeditionary Forces during the First World War. So in 1922, the land here at Vimy Ridge was given to Canada from France in perpetuity for commemorative purposes. It took 11 years to construct this memorial. The monument was unveiled in June of 1936. Behind me, you see the front of the memorial. On the 2 sides, you have 2 statues who are known as the Defenders. Directly behind me, you will see the figure known as Canada Bereft, or Mother Canada, and she looks down on the tomb of the unknown soldier. However, unlike the tomb of the unknown soldier in Ottawa, there is no soldier buried here underneath this monument. Further back, you will see 2 pylons, one representing France, the other Canada. At the very top, there are 6 figures, all representing international values such as truth, justice, and hope. The statue at the highest point is the statue representing peace.
Construit sur le flanc de la colline au point le plus élevé de la crête de Vimy, le monument repose sur un lit d'environ 15 000 tonnes de béton, renforcé de centaines de tonnes d'acier. L'excavation a exigé une très grande attention, le sol étant rempli de bombes et d'obus non explosés. D'ailleurs, plusieurs furent déterrés au moment du creusage. La partie la plus profonde de la fondation descend jusqu'à 13 mètres et se trouve sous les murs de la façade, qui font face à l'est. La base et les pylônes jumeaux contiennent presque 6 000 tonnes de pierres calcaires spéciales, extrêmement durables, transportées sur les lieux à partir de Yougoslavie, la Croatie actuelle.
Okay, so there you have it. Essentially, that was a big snapshot of what you can visit at Vimy. And when I say it's a big snapshot, there are bits and pieces that would be missing in that video, but we could make a full feature film if we wanted about visiting Vimy. The pieces that we're essentially missing is that we do have cemeteries that are on the site as well, Givenchy Road and Canadian Cemetery No. 2, that are an essential part of the visit, as well as Annika mentioned it a bit earlier. We also have our visitor center, which opened in 2017 and has been welcoming guests since then. So that's it. I hope that everybody has enjoyed the clip. I think Vanessa might be intervening, but we're all yours for Q&A now.
Thank you so much for sharing that video. That was really interesting, and especially for, I don't know, people that may have been wanting to travel. I know for me, it definitely gave me the idea to go visit it in person. I would love to invite anyone who's present and have some questions that they want to ask. You can ask your question in English or in French, and we're happy to ask Jean-Pierre and Annika to answer. Robert said, I haven't been back to Vimy in 10 years. It looks amazing. Really looking forward to going back.
We have a lot of people who come to the site who visited. I had somebody today who had visited the site 20 years ago, and it has changed a lot, quite a bit. The monument in itself underwent a lot of work in 2007, and so it has changed quite a bit. And even we have a lot of folks that live in the villages and the towns around Vimy who used to come and play in the craters or hide and seek in the trenches. So as you can imagine, they see that the site has changed quite a bit as well. But it still looks as amazing as it did back then.
Yeah, I see so many questions and comments here. So someone is asking, could we get a brief recap of what was said in the crypt? Because unfortunately the French is rusty, so I didn't quite understand what was said in French.
Absolutely. Annika, you want to tackle that one? Or
You can take that one.
yeah, okay. Essentially what we're saying is that, well, the crypt is, as I mentioned a bit earlier, is one of those places on the site that unfortunately the public doesn't have access to. We go under there sometimes for very special visits or reasons. We usually like to take our guides under the monument as a special surprise at the end of their time with us. But essentially what we're saying is that there's 15,000 tons of reinforced concrete that was used to build that base of the monument. So as you're stepping on the platform of the monument, where we have the stairs and the pylons, underneath your feet is not a solid base. That's what it really looks like. So that's a lot of concrete to hold it in place. And of course, as they were building the site, the whole site in itself is still it was a battlefield. So as they were building it and digging through the side of the ridge, they of course came across ordnances and unexploded ordnances and so many more artifacts. And as you can imagine, a battlefield contains not too long after the war. And even today, we keep finding things that pop up here and there, but that's in a big nutshell is what the video was essentially explaining, that there's quite a bit of concrete holding that the monument in place.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a great question here, and I was actually wondering the same thing. If no one is buried there, I wonder what is the purpose of the crypt?
Well, the crypt in itself is, we call it the crypt, but essentially it's the foundation of the monument. So there's nobody actually buried in it. I think it's a more common name that we use as called the crypt, but we could call it also the foundation of the monument. But indeed, there's nobody buried in the crypt.
Do we know where the soldiers have been buried?
Well, no soldiers as is. We do have a tomb of the unknown soldier on the monument. But it's more of symbolic than anything else. So contrary to, as Olivia was mentioning in the video, contrary to the Ottawa unknown soldier, tomb of the unknown soldier, ours doesn't actually have a soldier in it. So it's much more symbolic than anything else.
Okay. Next question: how many sculptors worked on the monument, and how did Walter Allward manage the crews?
I would love to give you a number precise of sculptors, but unfortunately, that's one of the many numbers that purposely is slipping from my mind right now. But it was an army of sculptors that worked on the monument. When looking at the pictures of the construction, we can see the incredible amount of people that were building, sculpting, and so much more. So it was a gigantic effort in terms of building the monument and getting the sculptures ready on time.
Mm-hmm. next question. Someone is asking, can you visit the site at night?
Yes, and it's very popular at night as well. As you can see, the clip at the end that was presented, that's what the monument looks like at night. The landscape changes completely. The monument is flooded with light, and so visitors can access the site at night. It's a very popular place for watching the sunset or watching the sun coming up. People come early and people come late at night, so the site really is around the clock, and the scenery changes. It's a cloudy night or it's a clear night, it completely changes. But it's it's one of the things that I like recommending to folks who have the chance of coming here to Vimy. If you're going to come to Vimy, you should at very least stay more than just for the visit of Vimy. Book a night in Arras or Lens that's not too far away. Come see the monument early in the morning or late at night. You're usually alone. There's not too many people that visit at that time, so you definitely get a different vibe from seeing it when there are a little less visitors on site. But yes,
Oops, I think there's a little lag. Annika, I think you're still here, right?
I'm still with you.
All right, so hopefully you can answer. Oops, there you go. All right. Thank you for that. That is really exciting. Next question we have: looking forward to international travel. How easy is it to get to the memorial by public transport without renting a car?
Well, I would probably advise that your easiest way to get to the memorial would be that you might need to rent a car or find a way there. There is ways to get there, but it's kind of on a ridge, a little bit isolated. So you would be a best bet with getting there by car.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely good to know. Where, Jean-Pierre, I think you're muted.
you're on mute, which is the phrase of the year, right? I'll add on to what Annika just mentioned. So it is fairly easy in a sense that if you're in Paris, for example, where everybody lands, there is a train that comes all the way to Arras, which is the closest bigger city. And then once you're in Arras, don't quote me on this, but 99% of the taxi drivers absolutely know where to go if you tell them that you want to visit Vimy. And they will also usually book a time to come pick you up afterwards. That's one way to do it. So you save the car ride from Paris to Arras, take the train, worth it. And after that, take a taxi from Arras to Vimy. There are bike rentals in Arras that you can take that will take you, you can take your bike to Vimy as well. It's a bit out of town, but worth it. So taxi, biking, those are very possibilities. Unfortunately, there's no subway that makes it out to Vimy. Sorry.
Just out of curiosity, how far is it from Paris? How long is the drive?
Paris Arras is about an hour and a few extra minutes, maybe an hour and a half if you're not going too fast, but within less than 2 hours for sure you will be able to go from Paris to Vimy. Yeah.
Someone was asking, how was the monument protected during World War II?
So this is actually quite interesting, and I really enjoy answering this question. The thing about the Vimy Memorial and a lot of World War I memorials is that there was kind of a shift in what these memorials were commemorating or celebrating, and it's that they were much more commemorating the sacrifice and the deaths that were occurring during the First World War, as opposed to celebrating a victory. So actually, when France was occupied during the Second World War, Hitler even visited the site, and it was a point of almost propaganda, and he took pictures on the memorial, which you can easily find on Google, in which he was using the site and his visit to say, well, I am being respectful and not destroying memorials, because the memorial didn't celebrate a victory against Germany. There were some memorials that were destroyed during the Second World War, obviously, mostly those that did celebrate a victory against Germany or that commemorated the deaths of Jewish people. But since the Vimy Memorial is just commemorating death in general of Canadians, it very much was not destroyed.
Wow, that is so interesting. So there was no protection per se, there was just some sort of respect?
Yeah, there was not any protections put in place, really. It was just that it was untouched, and it was used as a point in German publications, even, that it was untouched.
Wow, that is fascinating. Another question is asking, who is a typical visitor? Is it mostly Canadian?
Well, it's complicated. Sorry.
Yeah. They do come from all over the place. Right now, it's very local, of course. So we do have folks from France, Belgium, and considering the health restrictions that are in place. But on a normal given year, it is a very international audience. A large portion of those visitors would have been British school groups as well. So touring battlefields for many of the schools is part of their curriculum. So they stopped by Vimy because the British also played a role, of course, in the Battle of the Ridge, and on their way down to the Somme. Or on their way back from the Somme, they'll stop at Vimy Ridge. French school groups as well are becoming more and more popular on the site. It might be because the monument is free, the visitor center is free, and so it gives teachers a great option to learn more about this emblematic site. So school groups are taking a lot of time now to visit the sites and learn more about it and get prepared before they come over. We actually have and so as I mentioned, the locals as well. Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, and then the Canadians make up, let's say on a normal year, maybe about 10 to 12% of the visitors that come to the site. The rest of them is a diversified international audience, and diversified in age as well. School groups from primary classes to university classes to adult tour operator groups. We get folks from 7 to 77 and beyond.
Wow, interesting. Thank you. Next question: where are the casualties of the battlefield buried, or casualties of the battle buried?
So I can answer this one. The thing about the battle is that there were a lot of deaths that occurred, and there are a lot of unknown soldiers in the Battle of Vimy. On the first day alone, you had about 2,400 soldiers that died. So a lot of these soldiers that would have died during this battle, as well as in any battle really during the First World War in France or in Belgium, they would have been buried in what a Commonwealth war grave cemetery is usually. If their bodies were found, identified, they would be buried in these Commonwealth war grave cemeteries. So you would have, they would be alongside British soldiers, Australian soldiers, all the soldiers from the Commonwealth. If they're known, or however much information we know about them, that would be marked on their grave. On our site here, we have two cemeteries, Canadian Cemetery number 2 and Givenchy Road Cemetery, both of which contain casualties from this battle. However, there are also a lot of soldiers that are still on site buried today that we haven't found, as well as, in the rest of France, there are a lot of soldiers that were never really found, and hence the need for the monument to commemorate all of these soldiers that don't have a known burial place.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Next question, following up on the question about the original construction, how was the restoration work in 2007 organized and completed?
Getting there. Okay. Well, the restoration work, as you mentioned, did happen in 2007, completed in 2007, that is, was a huge effort, of course, in terms of getting the monument back into tip-top shape. As you can imagine, when you have a monument the size of Vimy on top of a ridge, it gets beaten down by the weather. And the weather, for those who haven't visited northern France, is quite legendary here. I would compare it to if you live in the Maritimes, maybe on the point of Newfoundland, maybe it gets windy, it gets rainy, and then 5 minutes later it's nice and sunny. It's total confusion when it comes to weather. And so the monument on top of the ridge, just the wind, the rain, occasionally the snow as well, hits it hard. But the restoration has allowed us essentially to make sure that, for example, there's proper drainage. The materials that were used essentially to seal in and all this wonderful technical mumbo jumbo that I don't want to get into detail because I wasn't there at that time, but having, being on the site and having talked and worked with the people who worked on it, there was a huge effort made to essentially to ensure that the monument is well restored, well built, solid, and can be much more resistant than it was. Allward had a great vision in using the stone that he used. The Segget stone is beautifully white. And again, just this afternoon, I was there again with some special visitors, and we had the sun shining right down on it. And if you don't have your sunglasses and you're standing on it, you're squinting because it's just so white, and it really is amazing. But and the stone is just well taken care of. But yeah, it was a huge effort to restore that. There were so many federal departments that were involved. The CW, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission as well. They're specialists in that, and so many suppliers, and it was a huge effort. It's worth looking at. I don't have any pictures with me right now, but looking at the pictures of the site during the restoration was just an amazingly very active, very full site where all was put in place to make sure that this monument got the much needed love that it deeply needed at that time.
Wow, yeah, that is interesting. And I can imagine that there was a strong team of professionals that were involved in making that happen.
That, by the way, is, and it's worth mentioning that so we underwent restoration in 2007, but those who may be familiar with the sites in northern France, Thiepval Memorial right now is actually undergoing a restoration itself. And so you can look at the pictures online. The CWGC have put up pictures of the restoration work that they're doing there, but these are huge work yards where there are hundreds of specialized worksmen and work people that work on these sites. So it's really amazing to see that attention is given to these amazing sites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Someone is asking, following up on the question about no known graves, perhaps you could comment on the names that are engraved on the base of the monument.
Sure.
So I can take that for sure. So on the monument is engraved 11,285 names. These names are the soldiers who, like I said, have no known graves, so we don't know where they're buried or their bodies were never identified. They're sorted alphabetically and by rank. So you'll see along the base of the monument, starting all the way from A to Z, you'll see all of these names written there. You have initials. So you'll have a first name initial and then their last name. If there's two people with the same first initial and last name, you'll have a middle initial or more of a distinction put there. We also have at the very end of the alphabet an addenda of names that were added after. And that is included in the 11,285 number. So really, these are the names of the people who we don't know where they are buried or where they are with no known graves.
Mm.
And for the names that are, well, not left over, because as you can imagine, there were a lot more soldiers that have no known graves. But Vimy essentially encapsulates those that that died in France during the First World War. Any other name left over, those who died in Flanders, and so in Belgium, their names would be on the Menin Gate. So anybody who's visited the area, Ypres is really it's practically next door to Vimy, it seems. But Ypres has a giant monument called the Menin Gate, where every night there's a last post ceremony. It's a very touching ceremony. And there's a little bit more than 6,900 Canadian names that are inscribed on that monument there.
Wow. We have someone that shared in the comments an article that was republished by the Ottawa Citizen about a photo of Hitler at the Vimy Memorial in 1940. So it's really great. Thank you for sharing that. And another question, and I think we'll maybe take a few other questions. If you have any, just write them down now because we'll be wrapping up in a bit. But someone is asking, is Arlen King still involved with the sites?
No, although her spirit may still be with us. Arlene, after many years of faithful service, has retired, and so is no longer with us here in Europe.
Great, thank you. Well, everything was so fascinating. Thank you so much to both of you for sharing all these insights. And it's really fascinating to learn about, you know, Canada's history that is not just happening in Canada, but it's also pieces of it abroad. I'm curious, I just remembered years ago when I went to France, my family and I, we visited another Canadian National historic site in France, and I can't remember the name of it, but I know there's two, right? So can you tell us a little bit about the other one, just to get people interested to check out the other one as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So there indeed, and Annika, I believe, mentioned it in her introduction. So there are two national historic sites that are outside of Canada, one of them being Vimy, the other one being the Beaumont-Hamel Newfoundland Memorial. So Beaumont-Hamel is in the Somme. It's just the department that's underneath the Pas-de-Calais where we're located. It is also a site that Veterans Affairs Canada is responsible for. So we also have a visitor center at that site. Those of you who are familiar with the monuments that we have, so essentially it's a caribou, one of the monuments on that site, but the main monument on that site is the caribou, which is the emblem of the Royal Newfoundland Regiment. Beaumont-Hamel is definitely a site that is very important for the people of Newfoundland in regards to their history. It is the day that the Battle of the Somme was launched. It is the day where an important number of men who went over the trenches didn't make it back, essentially on that one single day. So the amount of loss is huge. Folks back in Newfoundland know the story, share the story throughout generations and generations of Newfoundlanders. And for us, it is a true privilege to be the stewards of that site, and all the other sites, of course. Beaumont-Hamel is right next door to Tiet Valley. They're fairly close sites, and so we get a lot of British visitors that come to the site. Every year, we also usually get a delegation of folks from Newfoundland who come for the July 1st ceremonies. And unfortunately, we've it's been 2 years now since we haven't had a delegation. And this year, we marked the 105th anniversary of the Battle of the Somme and Beaumont-Hamel. And it would have been great to have them with us, but unfortunately that wasn't possible. So we're hoping that soon enough we'll get them back visiting the site. But yeah, that's the other site that we have, absolutely. And I guess this is a great opportunity. I'll stick this into the conversation, but anybody who's interested or looking into visiting Canadian sites while they're in Europe, France and Belgium, on the Veterans Affairs Canada website, there's a great little place where you'll find all the information. I know folks might not have pens and paper ready to go for it, but it's veterans.gc.ca/visit Memorials Europe, all in one word. So visit Memorials Europe. You just put that after veterans.gc.ca. I'll write it down in the chat. That way everybody will have it.
Yeah, there you go. That's what I was going to say. If you can write it down in the chat, and that way we can have it, that would be great. But yeah, so you said there's also sites in Belgium, then both in Belgium and France.
Yeah, so we do have sites in Belgium as well. So we have caribous in Belgium, and we also have Canadian memorials in Belgium as well. Some of them are located around the Ypres area, so Hill 62, for example, Passchendaele, those are two that come to mind quite easily. Those are two sites that mark important milestones in our history. As it was mentioned in the video, essentially the commission that was set up decided to put a monument at these different sites to mark the battle or the accomplishment. It just ends up that Vimy kind of won the jackpot in terms of the size of it. Saint-Julien as well is an important one, where the statue, the figure of the brooding soldier, designed, built by Clemshaw, is also another great site, and that one's in Belgium, and it is unique as well. And all the other ones, well, we have blocks of granite on which we have the story inscribed on them, and they usually are surrounded by beautiful gardens that are extremely well taken care of by the Commonwealth War Graves.
Mm-hmm. I remember you mentioned that there was something happening on July 1st, and I was curious to hear more. What was the event happening on that day, or just what was the memory of that day? That is an interesting coincidence, or I don't think it's a coincidence, but just the fact that it's related to Canada Day. I was just curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, I'll throw that one to Annika, because just quick, it was one of our first ceremonies we had done in a very long time, but I'll let Annika tell you what it was all about.
So July 1st is the anniversary, for lack of a better term, of the battle. The beginning battle of the Somme, the battle of Beaumont-Hamel. So every year we have a ceremony to commemorate that. It does happen to be on the same day as Canada Day. Our resident Newfoundland expert on site, Olivia, who you saw in the videos, always talks about how often in Newfoundland on July 1st, you have the morning, which will focus a lot on this memorial for this grand battle. It's mourning for this commemoration of this battle. And in the afternoon, the red and the white comes up and it becomes Canada Day. The two happen to be on the same day, but every year we have a ceremony. Same thing with Vimy Ridge. On every April 9th, we have a ceremony to commemorate, in which guides are present, you have the public present. Sometimes you have delegations from various embassies that will come. And this is what that ceremony is really for. It's to commemorate the battle that occurred on that date.
Mm.
And we were lucky enough that this year was the first time, like as I mentioned, that we actually were able to have public at the event. Last year we did a closed event, and this year we were able to open it up, and folks came and were with us for that event. And it was great to have a good number of participants from here and there, from around the villages, and folks visiting. And so we were really happy to welcome back visitors for that event.
Mm-hmm. So what type of ceremony or activities are happening on these days to commemorate these important events?
Well, as you can imagine, commemorative sites will bring commemorative ceremonies. And so at Vimy and Beaumont-Hamel, and whenever the occasion comes up at our other smaller sites, we definitely like to hold commemorative ceremonies, and to make sure that the different communities around our monuments are involved, invited, and that they feel welcomed at our sites, especially these days where unfortunately, due to the different travel restrictions, there are less Canadians that can come over. The local communities around us have definitely shown support in being present for events such as a commemorative ceremony. So we Remembrance Day, Vimy Ridge Day, that all these different days, there are ceremonies throughout the year that will hold commemorative ceremonies. They're big, they're small. You have them on all shapes and sizes, and also, what you'll often see at the sites are improvised commemorative ceremonies. So it could be a school that decides that they are laying a wreath at the monument. We see it less now, but during a normal year, for example, you'll have regimental associations or veterans that are traveling by group that want to hold an event at the monument, especially at Vimy. And so sometimes we'll be working, and out of nowhere we see a large group of people coming out of a bus somebody starts playing the bagpipe, and then the next thing you know, they're holding an event at the monument, and that's perfectly fine. In a sense, it is that's what it's there for. And so yeah, that's what happens. We have our own, and folks have their own, and at the end of the day, the importance is that respects are paid, and those soldiers are remembered.
Mm. Yeah, that's very important to have just times like that that are meant to commemorate and remember. So that's really beautiful that there's so many people that were able to be involved, and I'm happy to hear that at least this year you were able to have some people that were there in person. So yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for both of you for your time today and for providing so much insights. I think it's really awesome that we've been able to have this interaction, because we know a lot about things that are happening in our own country, but now we can also, by doing this virtually, have access to see sites that are maybe less physically accessible if you're not able to travel overseas. So thank you for doing that, and I would absolutely love to go see it in person myself one day and invite everyone. Here we're just in the wrap up of Historic Places Days. We have 3 days left. So yeah, I wanted to invite everyone to check out, we have another event happening tomorrow, another live tour of Minister's Island. And there's also a couple of contests that you can participate. You can participate in the selfie contest. You can participate in the visit list contest as well. So you can find all that information at historicplacesdays.ca. And again, thank you so much, Veterans Affairs, for participating with us for Historic Places Days this year. That was really, really exciting.
Merci beaucoup à toi, Vanessa, pour l'invitation. The doors are open, so we're ready to welcome folks back, and it is always our pleasure to greet everybody with a hello, bonjour, and whenever we get a Canadian accent going, we all really get excited. It's not even a lie. We really,
it's true.
we get excited about getting Canadian. Yeah.
Both of you are originally Canadians?
Yeah, from a small town called Montreal.
Oh,
yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.